From Apuant Productions and WUWM, this is Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. Today on Classic Eats, we contemplate that most iconic of American foodstuffs, the hamburger. I sit down with hamburger historian Sef Gonzalez and explore the lore and the truths behind this treasured food. But first, a story. It's 1916, and you're a cook in Wichita, Kansas, standing over a griddle at 5 in the morning, flipping burgers for a breakfast crowd that still remembers the scandal. Just 5 years ago, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle exposed the grotesque truth of America's meatpacking plants. Rats, sawdust, and human fingers ground into the nation's ground beef and sausages. The book turned stomachs across the country and sent beef sales plummeting. People are afraid of meat now, and who can blame them? You, Walt Anderson, have an idea that just might work. What if you could show people their beef being made? What if cleanliness wasn't hidden behind closed doors, but performed in full view, surrounded by white tile and stainless steel gleaming, pristine and sanitary? What if the restaurant itself looked incongruously like a castle, small, improbable, and somehow trustworthy in its very quaintness? But you can't do it alone. Enter Billy Ingram, a real estate and insurance man with $700 burning a hole in his pocket and a hunger for something bigger than selling plots of land and policies for death. Ingram's odd, eccentric, some would say. He insists on porcelain enamel exteriors, white uniforms for all employees, and a burger so small it costs just a nickel. 5 cents for a square patty on a tiny bun, topped with onions and a pickle. The skeptics laugh. Who would pay for something so small? Billy has a vision. Cleanliness, consistency, and volume. Sell 'em cheap, sell 'em fast, and sell 'em by the sackful. The first White Castle opens in Wichita in 1921, a tiny white fortress on a corner lot. You cook the burgers in plain sight. Onions sizzle on the griddle. The smell wafts down the street. People come once out of curiosity, then return because the burger tastes the same every single time. And because they can see you making it. Clean hands on a clean grill in a spotless white building. Within a few years, Ingram's peculiar genius becomes clear. He doesn't franchise, too risky, too chaotic, too likely to tarnish the name. Instead, he keeps every location under direct company control. Same tile, same uniforms, same 5-cent burger from Wichita to Omaha to Kansas City. In 1931, there are over 100 White Castles scattered across the Midwest and beyond, each one a gleaming testament to Ingram's obsessive standards. He hires engineers to design a portable building that can be assembled in days. He pioneers frozen hamburger patties to ensure consistency. He even commissions a study from the University of Minnesota to prove that his burgers are nutritious, publishing the results in newspapers to combat lingering meat fears. How could you have known, standing at that griddle in 1916, that your partnership with this erstwhile insurance salesman would birth an empire? That White Castle would survive the Depression, 2 world wars, and countless imitators? That its little square burgers would inspire Ray Kroc and the McDonald's brothers, setting the template for every fast food chain to follow? You couldn't have known that White Castle's obsession with cleanliness would rehabilitate ground beef in the American imagination, transforming it from suspected poison to comfort food. That the company would remain family-owned for over a century, outlasting nearly every other chain of its era. The years in Wichita, cooking on that visible griddle, pushing back at the nation's meat crisis with transparency and a 5-cent promise. That was when you built the foundation for American fast food, from your well-defended, gleaming White Castle. Welcome to Classic Eats. I'm Kyle Johnson Cherek. This is a show about culinary history, why we eat what we eat, the people, the places, the scenes and situations that set the course for the way we dine. Each show, we pick a thing, a person, a drink, a movement, or an object that made its mark on what we call food. My guest today on Classic Eats is Hamburger historian Sef Gonzalez.
My name is Sef Gonzalez. I started a food blog in 2008 called The Burger Beast. The initial plan was really for me to write about burgers and places that I loved in South Florida. And from there it grew and expanded into comfort food, and I started doing road travels. And I've always been into history, and that led to me eventually opening a burger museum, as well as writing a book called All About the Burger, where I kind of try to correct a lot of the wrong information that's out there. And I think I'm probably due for a second edition.
First of all, thank you for being on this podcast. So if you could give me, in let's say a fairly long elevator ride's time, the history of the burger from way back whenever it started in Hamburg, or probably not there,
Right.
all the way up to kind of 1950s, 60s America when it's totally accepted. Go.
Right. Okay. So while there is no official history of the hamburger, it's kind of impossible to go back to and say that this is, but we can pinpoint certain things. We do know that the Mongols used to ride around with mutton, beef under their saddles, and that really softened the beef up.
And that's where tartar comes from, because that was one of the names that the Mongols were called, correct?
Well, they would make it to Russia about 300 years later in the 1500s to Russia, and the Russians were the ones who created the tartar.
Ah, okay.
So
here we are already tearing down old myths.
Right. Yeah. And then from there we get to Germany, which they were the ones who cooked it, and there was the hamburger steak, and it found its way across the way from the port of Hamburg into the United States. And hamburger means from Hamburg.
Okay. So the same place that the Beatles got really good playing show after show after show for whatever years it was, because it was a port city. A lot of Europeans departed from Hamburg to come to wherever they were going west. And is that why the hamburger or the Hamburg burger kind of came to American shores?
It is believed that that's how the steak came over, and the variation of the ground beef came over. I just question, once it's here in the United States, everyone who lays claim to have created it, because now we find ourselves in Wisconsin, and we find ourselves in Ohio with claims that they did. I'm like, so what happened to all these states in between, including New York? That probably would have been the first place that should have happened. Right,
exactly. There's a lot of ports up and down the East Coast that those ocean liners would have stopped at, and hungry people.
Right, and so we're talking the late 1800s, the 19th century.
Okay.
Is when officially it starts popping up in newspaper articles. And Charles Green out of Wisconsin, Hamburger Charlie, was making burgers, or he was a vendor in 1885 in Wisconsin.
What's his name?
Charles Green.
Okay.
And Hamburger Charlie is what he goes by, and they do a yearly festival there. I don't remember if it's a scene. I'm not sure where, and they do a burger fest every year to celebrate that. It's been about 25 years they've been doing it.
So was he of German descent?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew a lot about his background. When I was just figuring out everyone who had these claims, he seemed the most possible to be maybe not the father, maybe the godfather, or the uncle, of the burger, because he was a vendor in 1885. I mean, there's no signage, there's no proof, there's nothing written saying it. All there is pictures of him saying since 1885. I mean, he could have been selling, frankfurters for all we know. And so, yes, of everyone who claims, including Louis Lunch, who the Library of Congress claims that's where the hamburger was invented in 1900. I mean, that can't be the case, because there's proof that it existed before that.
Right. So how do we get from the Hamburg steak, which was, I presume, if you could describe it for us, but a very different type of thing than what I get if I go into a bar and grill today and order a hamburger, and literally everybody in that room knows what I'm talking about and expecting.
Right. Well, a Hamburg steak. I've actually never had a Hamburg steak, so I'm assuming that it's a chopped steak, a chopped beef steak. I don't know that for a fact.
Does anybody even make them anymore?
I've never seen one.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say a Salisbury steak because that would be insulting, but
no, that's a different thing. That I know. Yeah, that I know was created by a doctor, and it comes with a gravy on. It's like in the same. They're cousins, but they're not. They're different.
Right.
They're different.
Right, like the frita is a cousin of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And so someone thought, let's put this on a bun. Most of the burgers back, and let's say back in the day, so we're talking 1800s, early 1900s, they were essentially what was considered a meatball on bread, right? And they were made mobile for you to grab and just walk around with this thing in your hand.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. The extras of the tomatoes and the lettuce and the onions and the mayo and the ketchup and all those things, those are late to the party.
That's late to the party, yeah. That's also when someone tells me that's not a real burger. A real burger has lettuce, tomato. I'm like, oh, actually, not true.
Yeah.
And that's fine if you eat it that way. I don't. I'm a pickle, mustard, onion kind of guy, so.
So what would you, who is an authority, Sef Gonzalez, the Burger Beast, what would you say is an authentic burger?
I would say it's a burger that is a thinner patty cooked on a griddle with some variation of pickle, mustard, onion. Cheese doesn't really become a player until the 30s or 40s. The lettuce, tomato also is starts making an appearance probably in the diner era, which is somewhere in between there and when McDonald's changed the game in 48. So yeah. So if you want to go back to White Castle, which is figures very prominently. He was the one who used fresh beef, and they took, a White Castle and it started spreading, and they caused a bunch of people to start copying them. They had so many copycats. I mean, one made it down here to Miami called Royal Castle. He was originally from Columbus, and he opened a chain here in 1938 called it Royal Castle. And Royal Castle is pretty much gone. I mean, the family moved to Texas, and they're in Georgia, and Royal Castle was in 5 states. And there were over 200 locations, and we're down to 1 location.
So take me through a little bit. I'm loving the storytelling of the explosion of the hamburger in some of the years. So you've got White Castle in 1921, you said?
1921.
Okay. So we've got the guy in Wisconsin. What's his name again? Sorry.
Charles McGreen.
Charles McGreen?
Nagreen. Nagreen. Nagreen.
Charles Nagreen. Who does a burger festival in 18-something.
He doesn't do a burger festival. He's just, burgers were associated like with hot dogs. You'd find them at festivals and fairs. And so he was a vendor at one of these.
Oh, okay. Yeah. In 18 what?
85.
1885.
Yeah.
And so close to the 20th century. And then 40 years later, we know we've got White Castle in 1921 in Columbus, Ohio.
In Wichita, Kansas.
Excuse me, Wichita, Kansas. Wichita, Kansas, yeah. Midwest. And then they explode, and there's lots of copycats. How many copycats are we talking? How far do they reach?
They made it down to Miami, all over the states.
Can you tell me about some of the other names? You mentioned McDonald's, maybe George Webb's. Just you fill in the gaps because you're the expert. But
White Tower is probably the best known copycat because they were in the Chicago area, and they actually filed a lawsuit against White Castle when they moved into their area. And they ended up losing the lawsuit because it turns out that they had blueprints of White Castle for building out their buildings. Didn't turn out too well for them. White Castle allowed them to keep using the name, but they had to change the way the buildings looked. And the White Castle
very civil.
And every time they opened a location, they had to pay White Castle for the use of the name.
So that era is the 20s to what?
That's probably the 20s to the 40s. And that particular era is also when we're going to start seeing diners showing up. Everyone, the diner fair, and you think I like Happy Days. And, right. And you think of the diner, you show up, there's a guy, cooking with a cigarette butt hanging,
Right, and the apron around the neck, and yeah.
I don't even want to put the idea of the ash possibly falling or getting smashed into your burger.
It's all in our brains already. Yeah, we all did that already.
And it's in 46. There's Bob Wyan founds a place that will be known as Bob's Big Boy. And he created a burger, one-of-a-kind burger called the Double Deck Hamburger, which was a burger with a middle bun. Most people nowadays will associate that with the Big Mac.
But the Big Mac, yeah. But that came from Bob's Big Boy.
Came from Bob's Big Boy. The Big Mac would not make an appearance till 20-some years later. 30-some years later. So you're talking, so when people are like, oh, that's a McDonald's copycat. I'm like, actually, that's a Bob's Big Boy copycat.
And Big Boys were all over the country. Like we had them here, but they were owned by the Marcus family. So it was a Mark's Big Boy. Like there were Big Boys.
Right. So they franchised the name Big Boy, but they would not let you use Bob's. Bob's was exclusively in California.
Sure. So, and was it the same menu everywhere? Was same burger?
It was different. Even the Double Deck Hamburger had different toppings. In the Midwest now, Frisch's still exists. Bob's Big Boy, there's a few locations still in California. Frisch's does tartar sauce as their special sauce.
Ugh.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. It's good. Come on. I mean, look, I tell everybody, you think of tartar sauce because you associate it with fish sandwiches, I would say, right? But if you go back in the history, before people were putting tartar sauce on fish sandwiches, they were on burgers. So even in Ohio, there's a drive-in called Swenson's Drive-In, and they have, they do a burger that has barbecue sauce and tartar sauce. It is so good, totally unexpected.
So wouldn't you ironically put, or unironically, wouldn't you unironically put tartar sauce on steak tartare? Or is that just too many tars?
That's a good idea, and I've never seen that on a menu.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Sef Gonzalez, burger historian, and we're talking about the American hamburger. All right, so we've got Bob's Big Boy.
Yeah.
And we've got...
Well, there is one other thing to say about Bob's Big Boy that I didn't mention. You were asking the differences. The original Bob's Big Boy was a red relish that went on the burger. That was the special sauce.
I'm sure naturally red, right?
Back then it probably, could have been paprika.
Could have been 50-50.
Paprika, pickles, who knows?
50-50. Okay, so I'm blocking down the eras here. So we've got the pre-19th century festival burger. And then we've got the White Castle era. Then we've got the Bob's Big Boy era. And then do we move into McDonald's?
We move into McDonald's in 48 when they opened.
The brothers.
The McDonald's brothers opened it.
Yeah.
I probably get asked more questions about the film, The Founder.
Sure.
And its accuracy. And there is some accuracy there. I mean, we all know it's a movie at the end of the day, and they got to build up the drama. But
I'm not going to ask any questions about the movie, The Founder.
Yeah, I could tell you that's probably what I answer the most because people are like, "Oh my God, it's such a great movie." I'm like, "Great movie." He did not rip them off. That's the most thing I can tell you. He did.
Okay.
That portion is not true.
Okay.
So yeah, McDonald's opens. It was a barbecue joint in San Bernardino, and they come up with this new concept, and everyone's got to walk up to the window and gasp. You have to pay first before you get your food, And it took some time to get people to understand that concept because most people pay, after you eat. Here, you're expected to pay first. Right. And they have an assembly line system where they're just being able to get all the food out very fast.
Sef, I never thought about what a cultural flip that is. Because you go to a sit-down restaurant, you go to a diner, you go anywhere, truck stop, fine dining, and you get your food and then you pay afterwards. And this new concept of walking up to a window, you don't even have a seat, and they expect you to pay for the food first. I mean, how well would I receive that today?
Yeah, and it's interesting that we know that. You see a drive-thru and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to pay first before I get my food. But if I go in here, I should sit down and eat and then pay. And then when the quick service kind of flipped that, they're like, no, you still pay first here. And you got to sit down. And you got to go get up to the counter to get your food. Everyone's like, what? I got to do work.
So we know the McDonald's story in general, and that from 48, then it becomes a franchise and Ray Kroc, and it expands across the country. And let's say by the late 70s, early 80s, would that be accurate? They really hit like peak saturation. I mean, I'm sure they're still growing, but most Americans know what a McDonald's is and have eaten there. Would that be fair?
That is fair. Also, one of the common misconceptions about Burger King is that Burger King was all along the number two. Burger King was founded in Jacksonville in '53, and then they would franchise to Miami in '54. And by the end of that decade, they were already the owners of the company that had created the Whopper. And it really wasn't until the late '60s that all this burger competition is starting to, build up. Wendy's isn't founded till '69.
Interesting.
And then you're talking, and the second biggest company in the